Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Hannibal, Missouri-born, New York City-based jazz drummer Matt Kane on the new COVID-19 jazz world. We had a raw and open discussion about this new coronavirus environment, a place we've been on lockdown with since mid-March 2020. We talked about how jazz is doing today, what the future might just hold, and a lot of other things related to the arts and jazz. So please dig this interview.
Basically, a function of what I'm trying to do here is to really reach out to cats that, I just have loved over the years, and we've had great conversations to talk about COVID-19 and what it's doing to jazz and what we could do to help and just talk about it, And
yeah,
I've been doing, when this happened personally for me, I couldn't even listen to the radio. I listened to KCSM out of Frisco, and I couldn't listen to the radio. I was just in shock. And then I started thinking, I really, and I wasn't doing interviews, and I'm like, I really need to interview. And as this has gone on, man, I've done so many interviews and with people all over the world. And, my son and my stepdaughter have sat in and listened to conversations, and it's given them hope. And it's just been kind of an all-around therapeutic thing, but I think, too, it's about really just capturing just some joy, hopefully, and just some real raw about something that we've never seen before as a human race and may never again.
Yeah, dude. It's cathartic, for everybody to talk because everyone's going through it. No one's excluded, so that makes it extra, it makes it extra cathartic in a way. Yeah.
But, so, again, thanks for taking a minute out. We've had a long, relationship with albums being released and your relationship to Kansas City. You're in the middle of the soup in New York. So talk to me a little bit about what was going on around March 12th and what has kind of transpired, so to speak, since then.
I mean, it's probably similar to a lot of other places, but, here it was business as usual, and I'm like everybody. I had a bunch of dates in the book, and I had a real big art gallery date that I was very excited about, and it was before they had even shut down the NBA games or any of that stuff. And the promoter came to me and, she was like, this is, we have to make a decision here. And it was, a little bit excruciating, but, I just went ahead and called the date. And, wow, it was the exact right choice. I mean, to subject people. Because, see, it's a little bit different here because New York State and New Jersey are the two, we've got like astronomically high cases out here. And so like, even around that time, I was, I started getting weird out in public, like, oh my God, I'm going to touch a door handle. And I stopped going to the gym and everything, because it's just it got such a head start out here for us. And, I'm from the Midwest. I've never been 100% comfortable with how filthy New York City is. And I've never been to Japan, but I've heard just how cleanly they are because Japan's an island and things like this could devastate them. So like, from what I hear, Japan, like they don't be spitting on the streets and, the sidewalks aren't dotted with, black bubble gum that people have spit out and stepped on. And, so I've never really been comfortable with just how disgusting it can be allowed out here. And so, when this thing really started to hit, I just, it's tough to even really put it all into words because it is so unique. And I've just got so many thoughts on it, Joe, man. I mean, because I lived in Manhattan through 9/11, and I was standing on 28th Street and 3rd, or 28th Street and 5th Avenue, watching when those towers collapsed, because I did not own a TV. So, you know, and the smell wafted through town, and the death toll and everything. But you know, New York went through that in a real kind of isolated, unique way, and it changed us a lot. A lot of my friends, their careers just completely went a different direction after that, because there was a lot of contemplation and you know, people looking inward to think deeply about the purpose of what they were doing with their music. I don't know if the rest of the country really went through it like that, but now everybody's going through it, like worldwide. So the changes are going to be profound, I think, and you know, it's hard to really put a finger on it completely now, but those are some of my just brief thoughts on it. I could go on forever, and then I'd start rambling, and, you know.
Well, the thing about it is there's such a cloud of ambiguity. It's like timelines. Like that's, for instance, with me, I was just talking to someone about it. It's like, give us hope, okay? I understand you guys don't know what's going on really, but just give us some hope, you know, and that's the reason why we have leaders in office and people that are in respected positions to give us some hope. Now, I understand there's grim realities, but give us something. And it's like, since this started, they give us a date, and they're like, no, let's not do it. And then it's like, the more we hear about this, it's like they toss around staying home another month or two as if it's like another hour or two. It's like, that to me is a problem, because you need to give us some hope and not yank the rug. And you need to give us some kind of like timetable or something. And then, of course, everything else, man, you know, since we, you know, you teach everything you ever really needed to learn, you learn in kindergarten. And I believe that. And we've been told our whole lives, look people in the eyes, shake their hands, say hello, get up there and get into it and do it. And everything that we've been taught has been taken away in a month and a half. We can't go anywhere. We can't do anything. We're not supposed to stand next to each other. We're not supposed to shake hands. We're not supposed to do this. We're not supposed to do that. Oh, and if someone leaves their house and you don't think they should, you can maybe call the police on them. We've gone in a month and a half from absolute, you know, freedom, so to speak, to a complete level of lockdown. And all of these things that we're used to are just 100% gone. You know, and that's not even talking about all these mitigating circumstances that are around musicians that have no gigs and everything's swallowed up, and we don't know if businesses are going to come back. And I'm not trying to be dark, but what I'm trying to put out here is there's got to be some level of hope, and I'm going to give you that hope right now. And my last real jazz show I saw was Bill Frisell came with his trio at the Nelson Atkins, and Amanda has gone to all these shows with me for the last 3 years, and she loved it. But this show touched her in a different way. And at the very end of the show, towards the end, right before their encore of Space Oddity, they played We Shall Overcome. And Petra stood up, and the crowd, almost in some cerebral unison, knowing the world was going to do what it was going to do, all these people stood up and swayed and sang We Shall Overcome in unison.
That's deep.
And it's like, I'm thinking about my true last show, and that was profound, and that was March 3rd, you know, and then I'm talking to some cats that are getting ready to go to Paris for 2 weeks, and they, a week later, had to scramble back when everything got crazy. So, you know, there's so many parts of this that are affecting us, but I guess my question to you more pointedly is this. What can people out there do to support the arts? Because we know that the darkness that's out there right now is going to be obliterated by the light of the arts. Visual, auditory, TV, film, all of that is going to be the thing that's going to save us. But for jazz, for a world that's given us so much, that's always survived and played through adversity, what can we do now to support you guys?
You know, I wish I had a real solid answer for that. You know, I think that and speaking, you know, of jazz, if we, use that term, it's a small cottage industry, so to speak, and the jazz community does tend to take care of its own somewhat, and I think that there are a lot of people out there that are big supporters of the music, and they're sitting in their living rooms contemplating that very question. People that selflessly promote concert series and that put out publications, and people like yourself. I think that probably really one of the best things is for people to contemplate what the music means to them, and to think about when it does come back, how can all of us, artists and listeners and promoters, whatever, how can we serve the music when we can? I do think that's really a bedrock foundational purpose that we've had all along. But now with this in mind, it's a good time to amplify that purpose and to think a little further about it and what does it mean to us? Something as simple as like a Facebook post about I miss music and this is what it meant to me. Just to get it out there. The thought, just to put the thought out there. Wow, I miss live jazz. This is what it meant to me. This is what I really think of it. And this is why I miss it. And for everybody to think about that. I do think that the appreciation, it's something that we all took for granted. Being able to just waltz into a club and rub elbows with people, and I was forever bitching about having to be jammed into teeny little Manhattan clubs and crammed behind my drum set and only being able to play half a drum kit because there's not enough room and all that kind of stuff. And but hey, that's on the flip side, that's what makes it what it is that we're willing to do those things. So I do think that right now is just where I think everybody should just be really contemplating what this means to them. What does the music really mean to them? And especially the artists as well. I really haven't put anything out there. I haven't done any living room concerts, anything really along those lines, because I'm just thinking right now. Speaking for myself, not to knock anybody that's doing living room concerts. I think they're cool. But I just think, introspection right now, and I'd love to see somebody make a post about what the music means to them and why do they really love it, and jazz kind of needs that. A lot of people that are not tuned into the music kind of look at us like we're crazy. Like, wow, why would you do that for barely any money and hardly any listeners, and jazz is 0.5% of the listening market out there or whatever. And now would be a good time, to speak on what it really means and why it is we love it, and define it. Like, what is it to you? Like, what is it? That question could go on for a long time, and jazz musicians are really, really good about, offering up their thoughts on that. There's been some really good discussions on Facebook over the years about certain trends in jazz and what this means and what that means, and sometimes it can get heated and whatever, but I think that's good. I think it's good that people speak on it.
The one thing that strikes me about jazz in this situation, and I've had a lot of conversations, Matt, I had no idea that that this absence would give me kind of a more, as if I needed to go more gung-ho with what I do. So it's like telling caffeine, you got to try harder, pal. I really didn't foresee this, but now that I'm over a month into it, these conversations have just been transcendental. I mean, the other day I was talking to a cat in Spain, Jorge Rossi, and he's on his balcony, and he's like, "Excuse me, there's sound out here. I'm sorry, and just give me a second." I said, "Well, what's going on?" He was like, "Everybody's out on their balconies cheering the nurses on." I said, "Get that phone, put it out there, and get it on speaker right now." And he let me listen to it, and I'm sitting here in Lee Summit, listening to this cacophony of sound of people cheering on healthcare workers. And those are the kinds of things that have been happening. I mean, whether it's someone in Sweden or the UK or whatever, everybody's been kind of like really, really wanting to talk about it. When I get to the end of the conversations, people are usually really happy, but there's been a buoyancy, an extra buoyancy, and I think it's gone two ways. And what I've realized, and these are some, and I'm saying this because I don't want this to be a centric thing. I think I just kind of want this to be a conversation because we both, I think, have some things here, obviously, as a human race that we're going into. But I think the thing is I find jazz musicians to be some of the finest specimens on the planet. And I've been around a lot of people, been around a lot of professions. I've worked in a lot of professions. But when I finally landed in jazz, I realized from Sonny Rollins all the way down to a cat graduating UMKC in Kansas City, jazz musicians are humble. They're tour players. They're involved in high art. They aren't doing this for the money. And they always are gregarious with their time and their wisdom and their intellect, and they're willing to give it, and they're willing to put it out there. And you all, and what I've realized over this time, too, and I realized this before the pandemic happened, you all are true architects of what we do every day. Every moment's unique. When I sit around, I look, and I think, I don't know that I realized this until I started doing interviews and cover jazz, but I'll sit on and look at just a target in like the 10 minutes I'm in there, or what happens with the bird landing on a branch. And the other day I accidentally was at a lake by me, and I saw a bald eagle grab a fish out of a lake, and an old Asian man next to me looked in my car and said, "I've been coming here for 20 years trying to capture that. I can't believe that just happened." And I think about that in the context of jazz. What you guys do every day is unique. This time that we're going through is jazz. You guys, every time you do something, it will never happen again. No matter how bad you groundhog and Bill Murray, it will never happen again. And there's so much to be said about that, and I think that's the strength and vitality of the community that I cover and that you're in. And I think at the end of the day, you guys don't do this for commercialism. Even, like, I was talking to Joe Lovano last week, and he told me at one point when Love Supreme and all these major albums were getting made, Miles and Coltrane and all these cats were roaring, they were making this language in these albums during a period when the race riots burned every club down, and they couldn't play at any of them. Kind of like right now, you couldn't play. But these guys were going through it, and they were still creating. And they weren't doing it for commercial reasons. They were doing it because they felt it. And I think that's the thing that's hopeful about what you guys are doing and who you are and what jazz is going to do specifically, because you guys do it for reasons that have nothing to do with, oh, well, you guys have to do this or you have to do that. You do it because you do it. So I think that's what's hopeful about you all as people and about what you do as a creative group of souls.
Wow, well, that's something I think about a lot. You know, I mean, Love Supreme is holds a special place in my heart, my mind, my life, and I don't put it on lightly. You know, if I put Love Supreme on, I'm not going to do anything else. I'm going to sit there and meditate, and it sounds fresher every time. And I think about that a lot. You know, an album like Marvin Gaye, What's Going On? An album like Stevie Wonder's Songs in the Key of Life. You know, these works. An album like Pat Metheny, Secret Story. Like, the introspection is something that I feel has been somewhat lost. Because before this thing hit, Joe, I was just feeling like somebody had me by the throat and just had me pushed against the wall with text messages and just endless stream of noise from news sources and just everybody just running as fast as possible, especially out here, out east, man. Like, just people just in such a insane hurry to not going to get anywhere any faster, but just tailgate you all the way down the road and just rage and just aggression. And I was really wearing down especially after my last album campaign. And I was just like, wow, like I'm just gone. I can't keep up. And then this happened. And like for the whole first month, I'm like that feeling that you have when you go roller skate, and you're on roller skates for like 4 hours and then you take them off and you feel like you're still moving. And like I felt like I've just still been moving, and finally, like the last couple of weeks, I'm starting to settle and actually be able to think. And there's 2 points that I think about when you mention that. I mean, the jazz musician, is definitely a unique creature, and some of the most intelligent thoughts I've ever heard come from a musician. Have come from people like Ornette Coleman and Herbie Hancock, and I've had some discussions with Metheny, and these are hyper intelligent, thoughtful people. It's interesting. My wife and I went backstage and spoke with Pat one time, and when we came away from it, she was like, "Wow, he's just always thinking." Like just the mind of a master musician like that is, it just doesn't stop. You're always searching and thinking of angles, and the improvising mind is it's different every day. Like you said, it's different every time. And that kind of brings me to the second point that I've been thinking about, is that, somewhere along the line, the spirituality of music was severely compromised when drum machines took over. And it kind of happened just as I was becoming a professional musician in the mid-'80s. When drummers were robbed of their livelihoods and put out in the streets by machines, music really took a giant step backwards. Or because I feel like music is so deeply subliminal, and when you mechanize the spiritual spring of music, which is the drummer, and I'm not just saying it because I'm a drummer, I'm saying it because it's true. When they took drummers out of the music and replaced them with machines, the spiritual element of music at large just it sends a inhuman subliminal message to people. And I think, I'm just going to use plain language, I think it fucked up society really bad. And now we have generations of kids who don't know a period without machine music, and they don't know any better. And, the drum set is like some kind of, antiquated, instrument. And I see documentaries on Netflix about the 808 drum machine and how it gave birth to all this great stuff and this great music. And I'm sorry, but it fucked up music beyond beyond words, beyond description. And when the drummers got thrown out in the street, and you got a guy like Clyde Stubblefield, who was never compensated for his rhythms, and they stole from him, and they built hip hop on his back, and the man wasn't compensated. And they stole his rhythms and turned them into loops and samples. And, I just don't think that, here we are in a spiritual crisis, and the one music that cannot, you can't use a drum machine in jazz. It's just, it's where the human element still matters. So, to me, that's that puts jazz in a very unique category. You can't look at a drum machine and say, okay, man, give me 8 bars out front. And, here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. It don't work like that. And so, it makes me think of Baby Dodds, who was the original New Orleans, one of the very first masters of the drum set, after they invented the foot pedal. And he was, the first real master of the drum kit. And Baby Dodds said something really profound in an interview one time. He said, you can't drum evil. You can't play the drums with a malicious intent, or you're going to put that evil into somebody's mind, and you have to play with love in your heart and to uplift people. And, jazz is kind of on a razor thin margin where, like, it's a virtuoso type music and you need chops to play it, and you need technique, and there has to be a lot of study that goes into it. So it can always dangerously fall into this, like, self-serving thing where cats are just blowing tons of chops, and it just doesn't, they're playing at you rather than for you. And that, to me, that has proliferated in the last 10 to 15 years, where we have this almost like a new category of jazz I call it math jazz, and I've heard other people call it that, where it's just all these odd time signatures coming at you, and it just, I think it's a little more like of an intellectual exercise, and no disrespect to people making math jazz, but I just kind of feel like, well, who is it for? And like, what's the purpose behind it? And, going back to Baby Dodds, to me, the intention of what you're doing, the purpose, the deeper purpose. I think everything just comes back to that. Ultimately, whether we're talking about how do we move forward, how can we serve the music, how can the musicians serve the music and therefore serve people. Jazz musicians have a real challenge in front of them, because it's not the most popular music. And people like Herbie, people like Chick, people like Pat, I think have been really successful because they were so honest with themselves about their music and their purpose, but that they were able to satisfy all of their artistic endeavors and at the same time appeal to a pretty wide range of people, especially Herbie. I think jazz musicians have to really think about, you have to appeal to people and you have to make people happy. And if you make people happy, well, and chances are you'll be happy too. I just don't think that we can go off in a corner and play to ourselves. I think we have to really think about, how do we serve people? How can we show people a good time? And that comes down to how you present the music, I feel, in a lot of ways. I feel strongly about reaching out to people at a show. I feel really strongly about being in tune to how the audience is vibing during the show and making it a presentation. I think that you should put a lot of thought into that as a musician. What are you presenting? Why are you presenting it? How are you putting it forth? What's the energy that you're coming across with? Are you going to play a tune and then talk for 5 minutes and then play another tune? Or are you going to write out your set list and bam, because people can tell. And, I do think that, a lot of this goes back to the spiritual factor of the music, and jazz is one of the last musics left out there that hasn't been mechanized, and so it retains its spiritual element. But as soon as you throw that mechanized element into stuff, and cats are playing to a click track, forget it, man. It's gone. That's just the way I feel. And so, that's going to be one of the things that I'm thinking about. I think that the world responds to the spiritual rhythm of the drummers. And, I don't see drum machines being, people aren't going to like go out and burn their drum machines and quit using loop programs and all that stuff. I mean, it's here to stay. And I do think that cool things can be done with it, but, you can't beat the spiritual sound of a real instrument, a real drum, and a human playing it. When you dehumanize music, then you send confusing, inhuman signals to people. And that's been happening for a long, long, long time. And so these are things I think about.
I like it.
I could keep going.
I like it. And I think about, oh man, I gotta remember who it was. It's sometimes these things blur together, but I remember there was a very seasoned Latin jazz musician, legendary actually, and he had told me that Miles always picked his drummer first. That was the first thing he did. It was the most essential part. And I think that's the key to all of it. If Miles Davis, of all people, are going to make sure that the central figure in a jazz organism is a drummer, there's something to be said about that. And if we're manufacturing it, that's going to be an issue. But yeah, hopefully, we recalibrate. Kind of. There was actually one cat that I talked to that's from New York, went back home to Columbus because of all this and kind of in the middle of things. But his debut album's coming out. He said something that, of all the people that I've talked to, that has just really resonated with me. And he, in high times of stress, like I was saying with the clubs getting burnt down, when the world was coming out of a war and when these guys were surviving racism, they invented bebop. And they did it because they just felt like they wanted to do it. So there's a possibility with this, with jazz, that there could be an invention or a reinvention of idioms with this. There could be a real high level of innovation and ingenuity that goes into this new period, which I think is a very interesting thought.
Yeah, well, the music has to be made within the time that we exist. I no disrespect at all to anybody playing standards from 75 years ago or anything. I mean, we learned to do that, and some artists can really make a standard their own and say something fresh and unique with it. So that's there, and it's going to be there, and I think serves a definite purpose. But once again, everybody that I look up to, Herbie, Pat, they were very keenly aware that they were making music within the time that they exist, and still are. I mean, Pat's new record is incredible, and it sounds very current, and you can hear some of the new trends rhythmically. His compositional thing is just, man, I'm blown away by that album. And but I've read tons of interviews with these guys, and they always talk about that, living within the time that we're in, and making music that from this time. That's why I really feel strongly about original music and putting some serious thought into what it is you're putting out there, what it is you're trying to get at. Every innovative musician that I ever heard, as soon as you hear them, it's them, and that they put some thought into that. That shit just didn't happen out of thin air. Tony Williams didn't become Tony just by a fluke, and or Elvin or anybody of that stature. And so, man, it's major important for us to make music that is of this time. And however we promote it and however we can survive and work off of that, I think still kind of remains to be seen what the changes are going to be. But musicians are pretty good at rolling with the punches. I mean, you don't really have a lot of choice. Change is going to happen, and it's absolutely the one thing that's consistent. Change will happen. This whole time this thing's been happening, I've been trying to think of some silver linings, trying to think of some things that, because it's interesting, when I was in New York and I watched the towers collapse, and I went back to my apartment that night and just sat there and was thinking, I kept thinking, like, surely society will stop glorifying some of the crap that it glorifies. Surely we'll come out of this with a little deeper sense of realism. And and then like 2 or 3 months later, I picked up the Daily News, and there's Britney Spears with a snake wrapped around her neck, and she's making out with Madonna. And I was like, oh, well, maybe not. And but this, it was kind of heartbreaking to me. After 9/11 happened, I fully expected like major changes, but the major changes only really happened around New York. And, obviously our airports became hell, and, travel became a real pain in the ass. But the majority of people, it was just kind of business as usual, but this is definitely different, and I have a lot of thoughts about it. I personally, I feel like Mother Nature, just put her foot down in a big way and put the human race in timeout. It was like, y'all need to go sit down and figure your shit out, and before you keep on messing with me. Yep. And, I think people, you can't just go tromping all over Mother Nature like this. She's going to put you in your place. And so that's kind of what's happened. And, so we collectively as a planet, it's completely unprecedented, never happened before. Everybody's in timeout. And you're seeing a lot of people show you who they are. This does bring out the truth. You're seeing where people really stand, in good ways and bad ways. See, beauty begets beauty, and ugliness begets ugliness. So it's all kind of bubbling to the top: the good, the bad, the ugly. And I think that looking for silver linings, looking for the good, is I think really important, and amplifying the good, talking about it, make light of it, hip some people to it, Now, see, I'm doing this with my students. My students are all sitting at home, and I'm doing my lessons online. And so when this happened, I sat down and I spent about 4 or 5 hours a day creating a listening list for all these kids. And I got really into it. I went on YouTube and I was researching like music all the way from, gospel, sanctified music, to like early rock and roll, Little Richard and Chuck Berry and Buddy Holly. And I just went through this huge list of, rhythms that I felt that my students needed to hear where these rhythms come from. And I learned a ton from it. It was really, I enjoyed it. And then as part of the curriculum for my school, I'm requiring these kids to listen to this music. And now they have the time. They're sitting around at home. And so like the chatter and the noise has kind of dipped down a little bit, where people's mind can be just a little more open to contemplate stuff and think a little bit. And, you know, like it was a little more space in our minds to let something come in. I really truly feel like just the static noise on the planet the last 10 years especially, it's just been like people's minds are so full that like nothing new can come in. It's just just, you know, I feel like finally, okay, like the static has dropped a little bit, and we can think a little bit and allow some things into our mind. And you know, Mother Nature put her foot down and facilitated that. So, that's some of my takes on it.
Yeah, I agree, man. I agree. Yeah, that's totally profound. There's so many profound thoughts and notions you put out there, man. Hey, I appreciate you opening up. I think it is imperative for us to talk some of these things out, for there to be a jazz dialogue. I mean, that's kind of, you know, jazz is the original protest music, and there's just so many levels of this that I think in all the arts and all the way around that need to be discussed. So, man, Matt, you're one of my favorite cats on the planet. You just happen to be a jazz drummer, so thanks for taking some time out and giving your Midwestern perspective in the largest city on the planet. I appreciate it. Stay safe, man, and hopefully, as we usually do, we rendezvous and talk. Hopefully we'll talk in better times and look back on this and see the silver linings materialize.
I think so, Joe. And hey, man, the feeling's totally mutual. You know, there are few people that champion the music as strongly as I've seen you do in the last several years. And if there's one thing I've learned, putting out albums and promoting them and going through that circle of, you know, writing, recording, put the album out, support, rinse and repeat. It's that this jazz community that we have. The people like you with doing podcasts, and people like Bradley Stone with his radio program, and all the radio programmers that I've met, stations like KKFI, people like Chuck Haddix, people just all really, it's a worldwide thing, especially here in the U.S. Though there's a network of people, and I found out that, you know, the radio programmers, the podcasters, the interviewers, the writers are, in my opinion, just as important as the musicians. I mean, it's one thing. We're like one community, and I strongly feel that, and it keeps proving itself over and over again every time I kind of do another lap around the album release thing, and I meet new people, and it's heartening. It's very heartening, you know, and I think that we'll be fine if we sit and contemplate and block out some noise and just keep the purpose of this music firmly in mind, and why are we doing this, and what's it all about, who's it for. So, man, thank you, Joe, man, for everything you're doing, because it's raining up here today, and you just made it a little nicer here for me. So, man,
thank you.
Always appreciate you.
No, I appreciate you guys, man. I'm just standing on the shoulders of giants. So, yeah, just got to keep the hope alive, and just stay safe up there. Send my best to everybody, and we'll talk in better times, man.
All right, man. All my best to your family, too, Joe.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest cats in Hannibal, Missouri, New York City, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Matt for his music, his time, his wisdom, and dedication to the craft. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit Neon Jazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, please support the arts and enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.